Hi there, I'm Ron, and welcome back to Farbulous Creations. I've had my Thunder Nova 35 laser for a bit over a year now, and I've made a ton of cool things with the stock 2-inch lens that it came with. But I've become increasingly curious about the capabilities of the other two lenses that Thunder sells for their Nova line of lasers. I also get a decent number of questions on the video I released a year ago where I explained why I bought my Thunder Nova in the first place, where people are curious if I decide to add additional lenses or a camera to my setup. So I reached out to Thunder to see if they'd be interested in sending me the other two lenses if I did a video explaining the various use cases for each lens. I figured it'd be a good win-win-win arrangement. Y'all get to see the various lenses in action, and Thunder gets a video they can point people to when they have questions about the lenses. Me getting a few free lenses that I can use on other projects is a nice bonus too, of course. So here's what I had in mind. Each of the three lenses has certain applications that it particularly excels at, and ones it's not so suited for. I'm going to run each lens through a series of cuts, etches, and other tests to see how they perform at each type of task. Armed with this information, hopefully you'll be able to determine if you need one or both of these lenses for the type of work you do with your Thunder laser. Let's jump on in. Before we begin, let's go over each of the lenses and what I know about them already. This is the standard 2-inch lens. This is the lens that comes with every Thunder Nova machine when you purchase it. It can cut and it can etch, and it does a pretty darn good job at both. Then this is the 4-inch lens. It's got a narrower cone of focus, making it excel at cutting through thicker items, but that comes with a larger dot size, so it probably isn't the lens you want to use when etching photographs. And then this is the HR lens, or high resolution lens, and in many ways it's the opposite of the 4-inch lens in that it's got a wider cone of focus and a smaller dot size, making it really excel at getting fine detail in photographs. So with the specifications of each of these lenses in mind, let's quickly go over what I hope to learn from my testing. Since this lens is specifically meant for photographs, I want to see how much better at photographs it etches than the standard 2-inch lens that comes with the laser. The 4-inch lens is not recommended for photos, but I'm curious what photos look like with it if you used it for etching. I'm going to run the same photo with all three lenses and see what it looks like. One of the other tests I want to run is I want to see what the maximum amount of thickness it can cut. With the 2-inch lens, I've been able to cut 1/2-inch plywood pretty easily. Pretty high power settings and low speed, but it can do it, and the edge is burnt, but it's not like flaking off. The 4-inch lens, I've heard you can cut decently thick hardwood with it. So let's get to it. So I fully realize this is sort of a strange way to start this segment, but after fiddling around with some early etchings and them not coming out quite how I knew they should, I suspected I might be doing something wrong. But here, let's let Day of Ron explain. So I was having a bit of trouble getting the type of image I was expecting to get on my first handful of tests with the HR lens. And so I decided to do a series of, first I did some research regarding image etching and stuff, because while I've done image etching in the past, I will be the first to admit that I'm not an expert on it. I found a ton of research by a guy named Russ. I can't remember his full name, so I'll put his name down below. But he did a ton of tests between dot size and speed and power, and recommends this graphic. It probably doesn't even show up on camera because it's so fine, but you basically have to examine it close up, so with magnifying glass or taking almost like a macro photo of it and zooming way in to determine which speed and which power is best for image etching. Because if you go too fast, from what I understand, if you go too fast, the laser can't ramp up in time to fire the dot, and it may miss some dots, and so you may have areas that should have dots from the image that are just blank. And if you have the power too high, you're going to have dots overlapping each other, and then you're going to get 3D depth in the image when you really shouldn't. You shouldn't be. It should be, the complete surface of the photo should be uniform, and just having dots placed where the photo is. I did this test. After I did these tests, I decided to do a test etch of our dog Winnie. on here. And where there was a lot of dots, the laser burned all the way through. So the power I found is too high for paper, because this is cardstock paper. It's not the thickest cardstock, but it burned all the way through. But the areas that are lighter and not all the way black look really, really nice. And like there's a decent amount of detail there. And so I'm gonna try these same settings on the wood now that I have them kind of dialed in. I believe they should translate to paper, since I'm not trying to get a deep engrave. I'm just trying to get the laser to fire the dots where there are dots without missing any by going too fast. The speed I'm working at on my Nova 3580 is 250 millimeters per second, and the power I'm doing is 19% power. So I'm going to set up my main action camera, and we're going to give this another go now that I have a little better idea of what my settings should have been in the first place. All right, that's done. Let's take a look. At first glance, this is much better than my previous test. You can see a lot of detail in her fur in the chest here and stuff. It looks really nice. I'm gonna sand it just a little bit. And I'm also gonna blow it out again. And that looks really, really good to me. It's still maybe a bit dark, so I should potentially edit like the gamma or brightness. There's just a little darkness here by your other eye and ear that doesn't need to be there. And I had mentioned that this should, for the most part, feel uniform, and it does, like throughout here, but I am feeling some 3D-ness to her nose and a little bit of right here. So I'm gonna adjust the image just a hair and do this one again. Yeah, without even sanding it, it looks a lot better already. Well, let's treat it the same though. Let's give it a light brushing, light sanding. And this is really fine sandpaper. It's 600 grit sandpaper, so it's not going to be too aggressive on the surface. So that looks phenomenal. That is a really good representation of this image. Here's the first one, and yeah, that's just too dark. This shows the entire image a lot better. My previous tests with the 2-inch lens were with a different image. I find this image has better detail to really do testing with, so I'm gonna rerun the same image on the 2-inch lens to give it a better chance to stand up to the high quality of this. Because yeah, this just looks really nice now. All right, this is the photo that just came out of the laser, etched with the 2-inch lens at 508 DPI. This objectively looks good if you had nothing to compare to. Like you can see detail in her eyes and her ears, like variations in the lightness of her chest hair and ear hair. This is the same photo etched with the same settings on the HR lens that Thunder sent me. As I am doing these tests, I'm realizing that the benefit of the HR lens is not necessarily the ability to get higher resolution photographs, because this is etched at 508 DPI as well, and the same etch settings. It's just that because the dot size is smaller, you're able to pinpoint the detail of the dark areas where they're meant to be, instead of getting more spread out. Like, there's laser dots in this field, but they're more fine and pinpointed, whereas here the dot size is larger, and so they're almost like bleeding into each other. It's making a much softer image. It's not a bad image, but when you can compare it to this, I think this looks better. This has a lot more contrast. If all you had was this, that's fine. But if you're doing a lot of photographs, I think it could be worth it to get the HR lens. The other thing I'll point out, this is a really easy photo to work with. There's a lot of contrast. There's a lot of variation in lighting, and so it's going to look good regardless, but harder to work with photographs. Having the HR lens, you're going to be able to pull out the detail in the various shapes and faces a lot easier than with this lens. I could adjust the gamma on this photo to maybe get it looking a little closer to this, but if anything, you're going to lose detail because you're not firing the laser as often. So yeah, for my money, this is a better photograph. This is not bad. I will say that. Like, this is just better. Like, if I was doing a photograph etch for a customer, this would be acceptable in my opinion. But if I could give them this instead, I would prefer to. So I just got done laser etching this one, and I thought it'd be nice to compare the same photo, etched with the same power settings, but different lenses. Right away, the thing I'm noticing the most between the 4-inch lens and the 2-inch lens is that virtually all the detail in the midtones, like her chest and like the coloring of her fur, is just absent in the one with the 4-inch lens. It really does seem like it was just able to get the high contrast areas, the darkest high contrast areas of the photo. The fact that this is colored in on the 2-inch lens result tells me that the laser fired on the 4-inch lens through those areas, but like I don't know quite why it didn't show up. If the overlapping lightly colored dots was not enough to leave a mark, but as soon as we switch to the 2-inch lens, you can see like there's nice detail in the midtones. And like I said earlier, this is an acceptable result in my opinion. I would feel fine giving this to a customer, but the benefit of the HR lens really seems to be getting more power into each and every dot without that dot overlapping neighboring dots. Because I think that's why this is darker, is like in like the midtones, is because there's the same number of dots here as there is here, but because they're overlapping in this photo or in this in the 2-inch lens, the overall image is darker than in here, where it's only dark where they're really like neighboring dots. And so I think the thing with the 4-inch lens is that the power, it's almost like defocusing. It almost feels like the power is so defocused in these in the midtones that it's not able to leave a mark unless they're densely packed. So that's very interesting to me. I don't think I would. The reason I did a 4-inch lens version of this photo, even though I know it's not meant for etching, was I was curious if there was any use case where like it might look cool to do it this way. But if you want a photo to look like this, you can just remove the midtones in post-processing with Photoshop or Lightburn, and I don't see why you would use the 4-inch lens for this. So with that said, I think I've done all the testing I want to do with the photo engraving capabilities of these lenses. So now let's move on to some cut tests. I'm really curious to see how deeply into the materials the 4-inch lens can penetrate, as that's kind of the selling point of it. And with its larger dot size, it means there's a lot more bandwidth for the power to get into the material. So I have a number of pieces of wood, various wood species, various types. I've got 2 different thicknesses of maple, 2 different thicknesses of walnut. I've got some birch plywood. I've got some poplar. I've got some cedar, and I've got some 2x pine. So my plan of attack here is to run a straight line, vector line, through each material at high power settings and low speed to give it the best chance of cutting through. And I'm going to use roughly the same settings on every type of wood, just because I don't want to figure out the lowest possible settings for each type of wood. Like I'm really just curious, can it cut through on the highest power settings and the lowest speed that I typically use, which is I typically don't go over 90 power. There's various reasons for that can go down a whole rabbit hole just on that. But I typically don't go higher than 90% power, and I typically don't go slower than 5 to 10 millimeters per second. So we'll see. I'll post the exact settings I use on screen as we're doing it. But if the vector line cannot cut through all the way through a material, I will give it a second chance, a second pass to see if it can go through and note that. But I'll do that as a second cut because for all the samples where the laser isn't able to cut all the way through on either the first or second pass, I will measure that with my calipers to get like a really fine reading on it. So with all that out of the way, let's get going. Before we get going, I wanted to quick show this sample piece that I did many moons ago at my local makerspace. That was, I believe, an 80-watt tube. I don't know what type of lens it was, but I wanted to try to cut through this roughly half-inch thick piece of hardwood. I believe it's maple and walnut that I just glued together this board out of scrap wood I'd found in the scrap pile at the makerspace. That laser cut 1/4-inch plywood, no problem, so I was curious if it could cut this like roughly half-inch hardwood, and it did not. But I kept going, increasing the power, doing multiple passes until finally it cut through. But it had to use so much power, and this edge was exposed to the high intensity heat of the laser for so long that it really ended up getting almost like got charred to the point where material was flaking off, and it kind of looks cool. It almost looks kind of scalloped, like something that might be done by hand with chisels. So it is kind of a cool look, but if you're trying to cut something on the laser to be part of a glue up like a inlay, you definitely don't want this type of look on the edge. So I'm looking for a clean edge first and foremost on all these cuts. I don't want a scalloped edge on any of them. So with that, let's get going. Now I ended up doing a test cut on each sample of wood with both the 2-inch lens and the 4-inch lens. In editing this video, I realized that showing each test in real time and showing all of my colorful commentary would take far too long in this already lengthy video. So I'll do my best to summarize my findings as we time-lapse over a lot of it, and I'll occasionally break for some of my real-time findings. And don't worry, I'll have a table at the end of this segment breaking it all down, so don't worry if you can't follow along completely as we spin through these. Look at that. Ha! That is very exciting. Let me focus in. Check that out. That was one pass, and it's a very nice clean edge. I could very easily see myself doing like some inlay type work with boards this thick and various species of wood. The black edge could even give it like a tiny little appearance of contrast between the varying species of wood between the glue line. This is my favorite result so far. Yeah, this could be a game changer for some of the projects I do. Alright, the maple is done. It got nearly all the way through, and then I just broke it off there accidentally. But as you can see, a few fibers left to break manually. So this one was very, very close, but not quite through. Since it did make it so close though, I will try the defocusing technique and see if it makes it through on a third try. If you're not familiar with the out of focus technique that I mentioned, it's basically where you focus the lens on the center of the board slightly rather than the top surface, which allows more energy to penetrate deep inside the board. That did appear to cut through on its own. The edge profile is not quite as clean as on the thinner samples. I think there's a little bit of flakiness maybe starting to happen on here, but it still did cut all the way through, so that's cool on only 2 passes. Look at that. That is pretty cool. On a single, that does not smell as pleasant as when walnut is cut. On a single cut, single pass, 90 power, 5 speed, it was able to cut through 19 full millimeters of poplar, and it's overall a pretty clean cut. That cut through in 1 pass. I'm impressed. Alrighty, onto the 2-inch lens and the same samples. I'm not going to stop and talk as much as I did for the 4-inch samples, primarily so we can get to the end and compare all the results all at once a lot faster. But I will say that the 2-inch lens did perform better than I thought it would. But as you'll see, certain samples that would have got a second chance at cutting through I had to stop midway through because it got a little flamey. Yeah, not going to have a fire inside my laser cutter, don't need that. That happened primarily on the thicker samples. The birch plywood, I'm pretty sure it had something to do with all the glue in there. Would not surprise me at all. But it also happened on the thicker sample of maple on its second pass too, so that was interesting. With the cut test of each sample complete with each lens, let's dive into the results. We'll look at the 4-inch lens results first. Each row represents a different sample of wood with a unique thickness. The first pass column represents how thick into the board the lens penetrated on the first pass, and if it was necessary, the second pass column shows how much further it got on a second pass. The results column with the emojis represents a quick glance to see how each sample performed on its first and second pass, but it's not the end of the story. I'll speak more on this shortly, but as you can see, the 4-inch lens was able to cut a decent number of samples in just one pass, and was able to get through a few more when allowed a second pass. Now the 2-inch lens definitely performed better in some of these tests than I thought it would. I had no idea it was capable of cutting half-inch walnut, so I haven't ever really tried. But while the 2-inch lens was able to do half an inch on many of the samples, the edge wasn't quite as clean as it was on the 4-inch lens. Okay, so I mentioned the results column with the emojis isn't the end of the story. Just because it might not have been able to cut through the random thickness of boards I had on hand doesn't mean it wasn't still an impressive result. The true metric we should be looking at is the maximum thickness it could penetrate on a single pass, as that tells us what we can expect to get through if we had a board of that exact thickness. The 4-inch lens, for the materials I tested, was able to penetrate anywhere from 13 to 30.5 millimeters, or 0.51 to 1.2 inches. Meanwhile, the 2-inch lens was only able to do 9 to 20.25 millimeters, or 0.35 to 0.8 inches. Another thing worth noting is if the 2-inch lens didn't get through my samples on the first pass, a second pass was far less likely to help, often providing only an additional millimeter or so of depth, while also overly burning the edge. The 4-inch lens, by comparison, often got much further on its second pass, meaning if you're willing to do a second pass, the 4-inch lens adds even more cutting depth capabilities to your setup. With my fancy tables and data out of the way, let's jump into the final overview. Now I know this was a long, slightly in the weeds video, but hopefully you found it useful. I'll be honest, when I first got my Thunder laser, I didn't really see the point of these auxiliary lenses, but now that I've had a chance to use them firsthand, I definitely see the appeal. If you do a lot of photo engravings, the HR lens will definitely make your photos pop and appear less soft. And if you want to cut thicker stock on your laser, the 4-inch lens will give you that option and overall give you cleaner cuts on those thicker materials. I put links to Russ Saddler's video and a few related articles down in the video description, as well as links to the 2 lenses on Thunder's website if you're interested in checking them out. So with all that said, what do you think? Did you like this video? Was it useful? Are there other tests or demonstrations you'd like to see me do with these lenses in future videos? If so, leave a comment down below and give this video a like so that I know that this is the type of content that the laser community on YouTube wants to see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!